This is the second chapter of Redeeming Stanley. The first chapter was all about Angela, who's one of those nice women who cleans her house perfectly and who finds herself madly in love with a bad boy, who is Stanley. Anyhow, here's chapter 2, Weldon. Weldon Frame was stunned. Annie had called him trouble on the World Wide Web. He hadn't thought she had it in her. His ex showed him the sight. She hadn't looked so happy since before they got married. His ex now, she was a piece of work. Went out of her way to have his ass slung in jail for non-support one time. She calls you Mr. Wrong, Daddy, his daughter had piped up one day. Still smarting from his stretch in the pokey, Weldon had been unable to participate in the hilarity. When Weldon saw the sight, Annie already lived far away in Oregon, too far away for retribution. She said she had moved because of the baby, but Weldon Frame, mailroom clerk extraordinaire and armchair explorer of the female psyche, knew it was really payback. As he paced through the office on his appointed rounds, he imagined people looking at him and snickering, "Here comes trouble." At one cubicle, he was almost positive that an analyst had switched from Annie's site to a financial graph as soon as she heard his customized mail cart squeaking by. It was too much. In the beginning, Annie had been beautiful. She had sympathized about the bitch. She had done amazing things to the independent entity dwelling in Weldon's frayed and graying jockey shorts. She had loved his daughter. On weekend visits, she and the little girl Red went to the park or colored Easter eggs, while Weldon watched the game and dozed, knowing in his heart that he was a good dad. In the beginning, Annie had agreed. Hell, she'd even paid the back support and bailed him out. In the end, though, she had shown her true colors, just like they all did. As Weldon slid envelopes into inboxes, instinctively palming those containing credit cards for his own personal use later, he thought about that night 2 months ago, the night everything broke forever. Weldon lay sleepily replete on the bed, bathed in golden lamplight. He had just consumed one of Annie's patented fine chicken dinners. The baby dozed in its crib. The independent entity had been thoroughly exercised. Weldon really felt too drowsy and contented to move, but he made the extra effort for his boys, flicked on the remote, and channel surfed, tracking football scores. Noises from the kitchen indicated that Annie was slamming things around in soapy water. Then silence, and then a sound Weldon could have cheerfully done without, the thud of Annie's feet as she lumbered down the hall. The bedroom door flew open, banged against the wall, and rebounded. Annie straight-armed it before it could smack her in the face and asked, point blank, "So can I count on you for child support money every month or not?" Huh? Weldon tucked his pillow more firmly behind his head and thumbed the remote as soon as the next commercial came on. His boys were counting on him. The screen filled with men in bright spandex and terminal panty lines, all hunched over a small pointed ball. "Are you going to help take care of the baby or not?" Annie shouted over the crowd's roar. The ball snapped. Mayhem ensued. "Look at me, damn it!" She snatched the remote out of his hand, out of his very hand. The TV went dark. "Hey," he said, "the Giants were 3rd and goal." He glared at Annie. Annie glared right back. Annie took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and then opened them again. "Weldon," she said slowly, "if you do not get the hell off my bed and out of my house, I swear I will not be responsible for what happens, and not a jury in the land would convict me." Weldon thought of the independent entity's exercise program and asked, "What's the matter, honey?" He even injected a little sympathy into his voice. He could catch reruns on ESPN later. "What did you ask?" "Are you going to pay regular child support or not?" Weldon laughed merrily. You know better. You know I'm barely scraping by. What with the support and alimony the bitch takes, I can't even pay my car registration and insurance. You know that. Hell, you won't even ride in my car. Comfortable as he was, looking injured was a struggle, but he managed. So what are you saying? I'll slip you a couple bucks when I can. Annie's face flushed an unattractive, blotchy purple. Get out, she snapped. She stalked back to the kitchen. Dishes crashed again. Women. Heaving a sigh, Weldon pushed himself off her bed, pulled on his sweatpants, and ambled out of the bedroom. She was asking a hell of a lot, insisting that he drive after what she'd done to the independent entity. She was just lucky he could even walk. But that was Weldon Frame, resilient, considerate, long-suffering, understanding, and nobody's fool. He knew exactly what all this was about. This was payback. He'd only been honest, he thought smugly. The woman gave great head, but when it came right down to it, he didn't owe her anything. She had to know she was a porker these days. Lord knew he'd reminded her often enough. How could she possibly expect him to love her? Must be hormones, he thought wisely. Women got crazy just before their periods, when they were pregnant, and after they had the baby. When they hit their 40s and 50s, hell, they were crazy most of the time. Everybody said so. He'd lie low. It'd blow over. Annie loved him, and the independent entity loved her. He stopped at the kitchen door on his way out. I'll call you in a couple days. Gonna see my daughter tomorrow night, he said. Annie looked up. Weldon knew she wanted him to kiss her goodbye, maybe give her a hug. But no way was he going to reward her after that little stunt with the remote. A man's remote was sacred. Besides, she had to learn that a man like him needed his freedom. Weldon prided himself on having an excellent poker face. Tonight, it was working just about as well as it usually did. Annie gave the platter a vicious scrape with the carving knife, sending gnawed chicken bones hurtling into the black trash bag at her feet and setting Weldon's teeth on edge. He closed the door gently behind him, silently congratulating himself on having been far-sighted enough to evade the shackles of a committed relationship. He would lie low, and she'd get past the hormones and lose the weight and tone up. And then they'd be all right again, him, her, and the independent entity. And the baby, of course. What was its name? And he'd tell him again if he asked. The next night, standing by the side of the road, watching a wrecker tow his car off to the impound yard, Weldon was glad he'd been so patient with Annie. The compass had stopped him for not wearing a seatbelt. A seatbelt, for Christ's sakes, when she could have been out busting drug lords and axe murderers. Registration and proof of insurance, please, she droned. I've been meaning to get this taken care of, Weldon said, baring his teeth in his most charming smile and fumbling the crumpled registration out of the glove compartment. He handed it over, wondering if all female cops had bodies by Frigidaire or if it really was the bulletproof vests like they claimed. The compass read slowly, lips moving, probably dyslexic, Weldon diagnosed, or maybe she never got past third grade. She compared the registration with his license. This you? She finally asked. No, it's the previous owner. See, here he signed off. He fumbled some more and came up with the title. I just haven't had a chance to get it switched over yet. He decided she really was a porker and probably just blamed it on the vest. Says here he signed off, 3 years ago. The cop drawled. You haven't had a free minute in 3 years? You're a busy man. Where's your proof of insurance? That's another thing, Weldon said, baring his teeth again. Support, alimony, diapers, you name it. The bitches are bleeding me dry. The coppice raised her eyebrows and walked back to her car. Blue and red light washed over her. Weldon slammed his palm on the steering wheel. Another guy would have understood about the bitch and Annie and the baby and why money was too tight for luxuries like insurance and registration. Maybe he would have stood a chance. As it was, his ass was grass. Hell, the fat coppice was probably divorced and making some poor schmo's life a living hell herself. What kind of a woman becomes a cop anyway, he wondered. Must be a dyke. No way she'd ever get a real man looking like that. The coppice strode back to his car. Step out of the car, please, she ordered. Weldon noticed with rising alarm that the drawl was gone, and one thick-fingered hand fondled the butt of her gun. His vast experience with what he had come to regard as the deadlier half of the species told him that charm was called for. "What's up, sweetheart?" Weldon asked, unfolding himself. Hands pressed to the small of his back, he tried the smile again. "I'm impounding this vehicle." Headlights swept up over a distant mountain. An engine chugged. Weldon didn't trust himself to speak. The bitch was taking the topaz. The topaz he had bought and paid for. Well, Annie had paid for it, but it was the principle of the thing. Damn it. "Is there something I can do to take care of this tonight, officer?" he choked, working a 50 out of the secret compartment in his billfold. His extensive knowledge of the Los Angeles police force, gleaned mostly from the Rockford files and the Mod Squad, had taught him that cops weren't immune to a little financial persuasion. "What are you suggesting, sir?" she asked coldly. "God damn it, I had to get the one honest cop in the Los Angeles basin," Weldon seethed. Or maybe 50 wasn't enough anymore. He silently snugged the 50 back into its secret compartment. The wrecker roared past, screeched to a halt, and backed up, dinging and hooting. The driver swung out of her high seat and dropped to the chipped concrete and broken beer bottles at the freeway shoulder. Weldon ran an appreciative eye over buxom curves encased in skin-tight jeans and a tank top. The night air was chilly. Weldon's eyes dropped to the tank top, hoping it was chilly enough to offer the independent entity a little innocent diversion. Yes, it was cold enough, the entity rejoiced. "A woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle," the tank top read. The entity withered. "Shit," Weldon muttered, not for the first time that evening. He regretted learning to read. "What do we got?" the broad asked. "Tow to the impound yard," the coppice said. "Invalid registration and no insurance, and attempting to bribe an officer. Guy says he can't pay registration and insurance because a couple of bitches are holding him up for child support, but he's got a 50 to wave in my face. Go figure." She grinned. The tow truck driver grinned back. Weldon turned away, face flaming. He pictured his fists smashing into the grinning faces, teeth shattering, blood spurting. "Goodbye, Earl, goodbye, Earl," howled the wrecker's cab. A bumper sticker read, "Shoot here, please, X in trunk." A red and white bullseye glared next to the slogan. A hole had been drilled neatly through its heart. The wrecker broad attached chains and belts and flipped a lever. The topaz rose on its hind wheels. The darkness beyond the strobing lights was chill and absolute. "Can I catch a ride?" Weldon asked. His charming smile had degenerated to little more than a tick. "I have a few more questions, sir," the coppice said, grinning viciously, her eyes nearly disappearing into her pig face. "But I'll miss—" "Sorry, sir," her eyes turned hard. The wrecker broad swung up into the high cab and slammed the door behind her. "Wait!" Weldon cried desperately. "Sorry, sir, no can do," drifted back. Gears ground, then engaged. The driver leaned out the window and sketched a little salute. "Against regs, company policy." The truck pulled away. "What you want?" Weldon snapped at the coppice. "Less tone for one thing," she snapped back. "I was going to do you a favor. The sovereign state of California isn't into the business of beggaring its citizens. I was going to ask for your ex-wife's name and social security number and run it through the system, just to see if anything jumped out at me." She frowned at him. "Now, I don't know." Though Weldon knew in his heart that real cops didn't do things like that, and that she had just made up the question so he wouldn't be able to catch a ride to a telephone, he couldn't resist answering, "My wife's not the problem, it's my girlfriend." "You have a wife and a girlfriend, and you got both of them knocked up? Ever hear of rubbers?" the copess asked, snapping her gum. The independent entity shuddered. The wrecker's taillights disappeared over the mountain. "I'm allergic," said Weldon. The coppice wasn't listening. "No, I think that's all the info I need, sir. If you don't mind a little free advice, I'd suggest investing in some contraception. You know, snip, snip, since you're allergic and all." Her fingers mined scissors. Weldon flinched. "And getting your registration switched and the insurance paid." "No shit, Sherlock," thought Weldon. "Can you give me a lift to the closest payphone?" he asked politely, though it galled him to do it. "Sorry, sir, against regs." The coppice grinned. Weldon hoped fiercely she'd get bugs in her teeth. "But you'll bend them for me, won't you?" Weldon hoped. Weldon confidently slipped an arm around her waist and turned the full force of his baby blue eyes on her. No way the woman could resist them. She leveled a beady glare at him. "Step away, please, sir. And no, I won't bend them." Inconceivable. The baby blues had failed him. "But what'll I do?" Weldon asked blankly. The coppice looked around at the absolute night. "I'd suggest you start walking, sir." She pulled her cruiser into gear. "Wait," cried Weldon. "My ex's social security number." "You know, sir, I don't think I'll be needing it after all. Your ex-wife deserves something for the grief you've undoubtedly caused her." She grinned, snapped her gums savagely, switched off the roof lights, and roared away in a storm of pinging gravel. Weldon threw his arms over his face. When the gravel stopped hitting him, he dropped his arms and watched her taillights disappear over the mountain. Then he did as the coppice had advised. He started walking. He stumbled over a sagebrush, righted himself, kicked savagely at it, missed, lost his balance, and fell onto a prickly pear cactus. "Shit," he screamed. "Shit, shit, 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 shit." He scrambled to his feet, picked out the stickers he could find, which was by no means all of them, aimed another kick at the cactus, picked the spines out of his toes, kicked the cactus one more time for good measure, and stumbled on, weeping and cursing fate, who is, after all, a woman. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. We'll do the third chapter in a little bit here.